And we need something else. Like, I think especially right now when like queer and trans people are so under attack by this administration, we need stories that are joyful and stories that are showing hope. And I think Ordinary Love is writing against the tragic narrative, and it is writing towards a narrative of hope.
This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Thanks for joining us here in the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. If you don't know, you can get all of our episodes ad-free on Patreon, patreon.com/Ivory Tower Boiler Room. All of Mary's true crime episodes ad-free, video episodes ad-free from the ITBR interviews. Also, follow us on Instagram, please. Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I like to put a lot of exciting arts and culture clips from the podcast, you know, TV shows, films that we've discussed. TikTok is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Long story. The Ivory Tower Boiler Room one got taken off by TikTok because it was too salacious and scandalous, in my opinion. But I might be just having an Oscar Wilde complex there, thinking, that I was causing such a sensation on TikTok. So please rate us on Apple. It really, really helps. Review us. If you're on Spotify, you can rate us there too. YouTube, please follow our YouTube channel. Please like the video, share it with your friends, your community. The only way that I can keep giving you all free, exciting podcast episodes is because of the reach of the podcast. So, rating us, reviewing us, it really, really does help. Also, shout out to Sean, our intern, who, if you see the cover art, you see the edits of the podcast, that's all Sean. So, amazing work by Sean. So, I hope you all enjoy this episode. Hi, everyone. This is Dr. Andrew Rimby. Welcome back to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room. I'm really excited for this conversation. Dr. Marie Rutkoski, I want to give her the credentials. We work hard for that PhD in English. And I'm so excited to talk with not only a New York Times bestselling author, which she is, she's written a lot for children and young adults, including The Shadow Society, The Chronos Chronicles, which includes The Cabinet of Wonders. And then she published her first novel for adults called Real Easy in 2022. She is a professor of English literature at Brooklyn College. She's a professional too in literature, and she lives in Brooklyn with her family. And we're here to celebrate her new novel. It's called Ordinary Love. Just came out in June, so right in time for Pride Month. I'm sure there's a little meaning behind that. So, Marie, welcome to the Ivory Tower Boiler Room.
Hey, thank you for having me.
So I'm just so curious. I was talking before we hit the record button about your PhD experience slash I saw you went to University of Iowa for your bachelor's, you have a minor in French, and then you went to Harvard for your PhD. Like this whole trajectory of where you sit now, do you think during your studies, oh, okay, I'm going to become a creative writer. Like I'm going to try to balance teaching and writing, or is like the teaching necessity, the writing is passion? What's behind this mixture going on?
Yeah, well, ever since I was little, I wanted to be a writer. I think because I don't know if all kids are like this, but I definitely wanted to emulate what I loved, and I loved reading. So I wanted to just do that, to do the thing that inspired passion in me. But and so I would write creatively all the time, even when I was in college as well. And it's one of the reasons why I went to the University of Iowa. And I wasn't in the MFA program, I was an undergraduate, but I did participate in some of the writing workshops there, and did an independent study with James Allen McPherson, who sadly has passed, but he was on faculty at the time. But when so at that time, I was doing this concurrent. a pursuit of creative writing and being an academic. I really wanted to become a professor. Again, I had the same wish to emulate what I loved. I loved being in these classes on Renaissance literature. I loved my professors, and so I just wanted to do that. Um, and when I got into graduate school at Harvard, to be honest, I felt like it was a mistake. I felt like it was a fluke. And, lots of people who go there end up having this sense of imposter syndrome. And I can remember being in my first year and thinking, wow, they surely have made an error in letting me in, but I'm not going to let this opportunity go to waste. I am going to prove myself. And I know that clearly I have some gift for academia. I can do research, I can write academic papers, and I've never really had any kind of proof that I'm good at creative writing. So,
Mhm.
what I am going to do, and I can remember thinking about this in a very um, internally articulated way. It was almost like I was sitting down with myself and making a decision. And so I thought, well, I'm just going to stop writing fiction. That's clearly not my strength. Also, I'm here. I need to do this thing. I need to prove myself and get a doctorate and become a professor. So I'm not going to write anything creatively for the next however many years it takes me to get my degree. And then my final year of graduate school, I had a fellowship to do archival research um, in London. And so my days were they were very boring, but also kind of idyllic, which was that I would wake up, I would go to the British Library, I would research all day until the library closed, and come home and watch reruns of Friends and go to bed. Um, and at some point during that lonely period, I had the idea for my first novel. And I began writing a few paragraphs, and I just realized this could be a book. And then I thought, I need to finish my thesis. I need to finish my dissertation. And then I'm going to write this novel. And that's exactly what I did. So that was a very long-winded way of walking you through my childhood to graduating from my PhD program. But essentially, I finished my dissertation, I got my PhD, and that summer I sat down to write my first novel, and I've been balancing the two things ever since.
So I have to ask, what was your dissertation topic?
Oh, okay. So my dissertation argued that children in English Renaissance drama, and we're talking about Shakespeare and his contemporaries, the children in English Renaissance drama, both on stage and off, became a way for that society to consider the nature of knowledge. That children, like the idea of childhood, the idea of children, became almost a tool to unlock an understanding of how knowledge operated.
Oh wow, fascinating. And I think that your writing, I'm new to your writing, so I feel like I had to play catch up because your writing is just so evocative, Marie, and it's very European in a way, or at least
Hmm.
I'm interpreting it. It feels
Okay.
very Victorian in a
Yeah.
way, like almost like I'm reading Middlemarch, but
Ooh,
with,
what an amazing compliment. Thank you.
well, that's my favorite Victorian novel. And I worked on Oscar Wilde and Whitman. And when you're talking about the British Library, I had a fellowship um, at Stony Brook and went to the British Library to see the Picture of Dorian Gray manuscript.
Mm.
And I feel like there is something so heady and dopamine fueled when you're in an experience like that. And it's just like that rush of the scholarship. So I feel like in your writing, even though, right, Middlemarch doesn't have the queer essence and anything that explicit, everything is kind of that Edith Wharton, who I'm also obsessed with. that just psychological, emotional interpretation you have to do because it's not all on the page for you. It's very introspective writing. I feel like you also have such a way of dissecting emotions in your characters that is so haunting and heart-wrenching, and like that romantic element. Were you always like in your 2022 novel, Real Easy? Is there like a through line here? Like, did you feel like you were continuing a project thematically, or did you feel like you were dealing with two separate genres?
You have said so many things that I'm thinking about. Like I, I mean, there's just so much in there, and part of me is being distracted by the thought of like a queer fanfic of Middlemarch. Like, what would happen if like Lydgate and Ladislaw got together? Or maybe, Dorothea, if, she were with Rosamund, she could really like bring Rosamund to life and convince Rosamund to shed her narcissistic ways. I don't know.
Yes.
Um, but I think that something that Middlemarch, you're absolutely right, that Middlemarch is something, it's a book that values character development and emotions, that what's happening in terms of plot is how people evolve. Um, it's not it's not really a plot heavy book. And even though this is a different period, I think as well of Jane Austen and how, in Pride and Prejudice, there's not a lot that happens. People go for walks, they go to a
Yep.
ball, they visit one estate or another. Like the action doesn't really matter. It's how the characters are growing as people.
Mm,
And so I do
yes.
think that that is something that I really focused on in Ordinary Love, which is not to say it has no plot, but I think what's most important to me is the emotions and the character development. It's very character driven. Now, as for Real Easy, in terms of what's the through line between that and Ordinary Love, I mean, they're very different books. They're in totally different genres. I do like to think that I bring a level of literary writing to both books.
Mm,
But Real Easy is a thriller. It's a crime novel. It is, in one sentence, it centers around a strip club, and it's about what happens when one dancer is murdered, another goes missing, and a third tries to get to the bottom of what happened. And that is a very plot-heavy book. And it was very difficult to write because I was knitting together tons of different characters. There was the central mystery, and there's the trick of building the mystery and giving enough clues that the reader could figure it out if they were focused on the right things, but also that it might be a surprise, but also that the book would be pleasurable even if readers knew what was coming. But I do think that that pleasurable part comes from the characters themselves, right? Like if you know where a book is going plot-wise, but you still enjoy it, it's because you're enjoying the characters on the page.
yes.
Or you're enjoying the writing style, or you're enjoying the atmosphere that the writer is evoking. And so those things, maybe that's the through line in that even though these are two very different genres, Ordinary Love is it's a love story told over decades. So two very different books, but maybe the through line is the emotional aspect and how much I invest in characters.
Well, I mean, that is so powerful. And I feel like to you also about is like, since you teach English literature, I feel like, the whole categorization of these keeps getting contested. And I've been having a lot of conversations with authors, fellow teachers about, well, what we really do is dissect narratives. And like that could be the printed page, that could be a YouTube video, a podcast episode. Like there's this really great book by Elaine Castillo. I'm not sure if you know it, but it's called How to Read Now.
Mm,
And it's all about her opening your eyes to, and I use it with my students mostly with composition studies and literary studies, but reading is also reading a conversation in your family dynamic. It's
Mhm.
that car that cut you off, or someone who pushed you on the subway and you internalizing rage. Like that's reading that action. And I think that narrative studies is really what we do, but somehow it got under this umbrella of English. And I feel like right now there's kind of a disconnection of that constant phrase of like, well, what are you teaching student? Like, why should someone major in English? And I feel like you become defensive hearing that over and over. And I'm kind of curious, weighing in as not just an expert in literary studies, but also a creative writer who sees things also askew as a teacher, like from a different perspective. How do you weigh in on that? Like, why should someone be pursuing English studies in this current moment?
I mean, I think you've already answered your own question. I mean, right? Like what you said earlier is so smart, and I absolutely agree with, which is that the skills of close reading and understanding narrative and symbolism, that can be applied to things that are not literature. I think, for example, somebody who wants to become a therapist could do very well in an English class because so much of it is about decoding what's really under the surface. I think somebody who wants to be a lawyer would also do well in an English class because you're learning the precision of language. Um, yes, so I think that you've already kind of pointed the way to the answer. I would also just add to that something really exciting that I think we're seeing and that maybe more professors could and should explore is that there are other ways of analyzing literature that are not necessarily written essays.
Mhm.
And I'm thinking of Natalie Wynn, who is this wonderful, basically analyst of culture and literature and history. She's amazing. She has these YouTube videos. Like she did one on Twilight.
Oh.
She did one called The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling, which was, essentially about well, how J.K. Rowling has
Wait, was that the
kind of betrayed
podcast
us all.
series?
What?
I feel like there was a podcast series I listened to about the witch trials of J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that, and there might be, but yeah, there might be. I mean, I would just say to your audience, Natalie Wynn is amazing. You should
Yes.
go watch her videos. And I've taught the Twilight video when I was teaching Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice to
Ooh.
my students, and we were thinking about the nature of the romance novel and the history of it and the ways in which it's been denigrated, the ways in which feminism both loves romance and wants to turn away from it and to say, oh, this is bad or lesser than what we deserve as women. And all this to say that I think that her video essays are a really great example of how you can do literary analysis
Mm.
without having to actually submit a written essay. Though I imagine that Natalie Wynn wrote her script, before I think that this was before it became a video, it was probably a written thing.
Yeah. No, thank you, Marie. I'm gonna like look it up right after we're done because I want to see all her videos now. And I do feel that, like, are you also experiencing in the classroom, that students, the younger generation, their attention span, their ability to just absorb material has shifted modalities. Like I feel that they're so good at reading emotions or like very snapshot, fast-paced, plot-driven type of material, but when it comes to say if I was going to teach Middlemarch, to use that as an example, or The House of Mirth even by Edith
Mhm.
Wharton, they're like some chairs are actually even giving advice not to teach full length novels because students are not going to be paying attention. And now there's almost been a model of teach excerpts of a book or teach, just one poem for a week of classes. Like, what do you think about that type of model of we've kind of already lost the students' attention, so we need to pivot to other modalities?
Hmm. Well, I'm going to say that I don't agree
Mhm.
with that. Um, and then I'm going to say something that might be a little bit unexpected,
Mhm.
which is that I think it's okay to accept that not all students are going to do all of the reading, and that it is nonetheless important for them to be able to engage in a conversation, even about things that they do not know.
Yeah.
Um, maybe this is wrong of me. I'm not sure. I haven't examined my own pedagogy, but I think that in life, we are continually presented with things that we don't know a lot about, that we're not familiar with. And that can be really dangerous, right? It can be dangerous because we can come to assumptions about things, that we can be in a position of pontificating about areas in which we have no expertise. We can come to dangerous conclusions that can really affect people in a negative way. Um, so there's a danger there. But in a classroom situation, I think that there is also an exciting opportunity to learn from your peers,
Mhm.
and to listen. And even if you didn't finish the book, to hear what other people have to say about the book and to ask them questions about it, to maybe make suggestions based on what you've heard and what you do know about the book.
Yes.
Everybody's got gaps, is what I'm saying. Everybody misses something, and I think being able to work with the gaps that you have is also part of the intellectual process. And obviously they should be doing all the reading, but it's not the end of the world if some of them don't.
I am with you and I agree. I mean, I feel that kvetching about whether students have done all the reading isn't necessarily a productive. It's kind of like there's been some debates that I've gotten into, polite debates, of course, but AI debates about, you know, trying to become the AI detectors of students writing. And like there's some faculty who are trying to find every case where AI has been used. And my feeling is it is clear to me when I'm reading through students' writing that those who've put more creative thought, yes, they might have more grammatical errors, but their thought and their originality is much more exciting than someone I know who clearly has used AI to just generate an essay. And, you know, I we don't have to get into the AI question because that's like an ever evolving question, but I do think something knowing that I was going to talk with you today, I was in Barnes and Noble here in North Jersey and I just like went on a little book exploration and probably like you, I'm obsessed with literature and whether I'm in a library or a bookstore, I love just seeing the different genres that have come out. And I feel like you've introduced or reinvigorated for me the beauty of a romance story and the beauty of holding thought and space for ideas in writing, kind of tying back to our Middlemarch conversation, that there's a lot of novels constantly being published that are fast paced. Like, I feel like plot is now more in vogue. Like, the quicker the plot, the more um, popular. But I do think that deep reading is important too. Like we can have both. We can have fast-paced plots and we can have deep reading. And I feel that it makes sense that Emily St. John Mandel wrote so wonderfully about your novel because she's also in that space with her novel Sea of Tranquility. So I feel like as a reader, do you gravitate more towards deep reading, intellectual, philosophical type base plots, or do you gravitate more towards thriller, fast paced, like let's just keep turning the page as quickly as we can? The spring season is here, which means there's a new issue of the Gay and Lesbian Review called Victorian Times, all about my favorite period of literature, the 19th century. And you'll see a rugged Walt Whitman on the cover and the dandy Oscar Wilde. Well, guess what? My first article is now published in the Gay and Lesbian Review called Once Upon a Time in Camden. It's the intro to my book, which looks into their queer literary relationship, but also Whitman and Wilde's homoerotic poetics, and specifically what Whitman does with male same sex desire before the category of homosexuality even existed. Like, how did he even express this in his poetry? Well, you'll have to read my book to find out. Book coming soon. If you know of a publisher, let me know. I'm shopping around right now. But this Victorian issue is so special with the Gay and Lesbian Review. There's articles on Dr. Jekyll and Victor Frankenstein. I'm about to see The Bride, which I can't wait to see. And right, Guillermo del Toro's new Frankenstein is all the rage. There's an article on Monte Cristo's Women in Love, Tchaikovsky's Men. I love Tchaikovsky's ballet. I'm particularly an admirer of The Sleeping Beauty, one on Captain Cobb. There's film and TV shows reviewed like Heated Rivalry, Boots, Kiss of the Spider Woman, which, if you don't know, I had an episode with Jeremy Fox from the Gay and Lesbian Review, the managing editor, and Colin Carmen and Joseph Federico, and we talked all about Heated Rivalry. You have to listen to it. And Kiss of the Spider Woman, I keep recommending to everyone. It is an astounding film. Boots, I actually had the creator Greg Cope White on the podcast too. You'll have to listen to his interview. Also, if you haven't heard our episode on the kink issue of the magazine, it's really, really interesting. And the ethnography one. And yes, there will be an episode soon about the Victorian issue. So get your hands on the Gay and Lesbian Review. The digital subscription is really easy to get, glreview.org. The print subscription also, head on over to the website, click subscribe, use the promo code ITBR choice. You get a free issue of the magazine. Choose the Victorian issue, will you? So head to their Instagram, their TikTok. I love the Gay and Lesbian Review. I get so many book recommendations, TV show, film recommendations. One of the films that I can't wait to watch is in this issue. I want to say it's pronounced Pillion or Pillion. I think I made it French there, with Alexander Skarsgård. So enjoy your reading, everyone. And if you're reading the Gay and Lesbian Review, please reach out to me. I want to let them know, that you all listening to this podcast are reading their magazine. Now that the spring semester is here, I am so excited to let you all know about a publisher, an independent publisher that's celebrating 40 years of great books called Broadview Press. I love Broadview Press. I have so many of their editions of classic literature like Wuthering Heights, which is coming out soon, and it's our book club choice. And they have so many academic books for instructors and for students and the general public. So I've had so many exciting guests on, from guests talking about The Wonderful Wizard of Oz, guests talking about vampire literature, horror literature. I'm looking at you, Jeffrey Andrew Weinstock, whose book actually just came out called Horror Theory. Look it up. And I cannot wait because I have two exciting guests coming on soon. and I've recorded their episode, so I know that it's going to be such an interesting conversation. The first is Rachel Tukolsky, who wrote a book called Writing on Fire, a fierce yet friendly guide to writing humanities essays in college. I've used excerpts of it for my writing two course at Montclair. It has gone over so well. I just love what Rachel does. And we get into this in our episode about this metaphor about writing on fire, like how that's a great way to think about free flowing, brainstorming, creative ideas, and getting into that flow state, which, as Rachel explains, happens not just in writing, but in many other avenues. And then the other guest that I have on is David Starkey, who wrote a book called Academic Writing Now, a brief guide for busy students. It is designed to cover the basics of a college writing course in a concise, student friendly format. Each chapter concentrates on a crucial element of composing an academic essay and is capable of being read in a single sitting, which, for a generation, myself included, I think all of us now, just consumed by digital media or just this attention grabbing technology, reading in a single sitting is definitely a plus. So head to Broadview Press, use the promo code Ivory Tower, and you'll get 20% off every single book in their collection. There's also a really cool digital library collection they have. So if you're a librarian, take a look at that. Message me. If you're a librarian, I'd be happy to show you what that new collection looks like. And I hope you all enjoy your reading.
Okay, so I'm going to do something really rude, which is to not answer your question.
That's okay.
What I'm going to do is what I'm going to do is respond as a writer.
Mm.
You asked me what I thought of as a reader, and I'm going to respond as a writer, just because I think that, we're talking a lot about the kind of book that I write. And so I feel like I should just say what my book is about.
Yes,
Um,
please.
yeah, and then, I can respond to your question, which is that, so Ordinary Love is about a woman named Emily who is in this marriage with a man, and it's pretty toxic and he's pretty controlling. And just as she's getting out of that marriage, which is when the book begins, she runs into her ex-girlfriend, whom she fell in love with when they were seniors, well, when they were 18, and they were in high school. And in the intervening years, this ex-girlfriend, Jen, has become this prominent Olympic athlete. She is a legend. She's kind of a daikon like Megan Rapinoe or Abby Wambach. She's somebody who has international recognition. She occasionally models. She dates all of these actresses. And so she's really changed from the young woman who had ambitions, but not like a lot of material success when she was younger. And so then the big question of the book is, will they make it? Will they get together? And so it is a second chance romance. And so as you were saying, it's there is this question of how much do you put into plot and how much do you put into sort of the deep reading or the deep writing of character development and emotions and so forth. And I guess I would just say that emotions are plot.
Mm.
That how somebody evolves and how the way they think evolves, that's plot too. So now I'm going to go back to answering your question, actually. And I will answer as both like a writer and a reader, which is that I like both. I think that
Mhm.
I like writing both. I like reading both. I think probably my most well-known novels are the Winter's Curse books. And those are books that deal both in a lot of plot and a lot of emotion. I mean, those are romances too, but there's like a lot of political intrigue. There are battles, there are duels, there's a lot of action taking place. And Real Easy was a book that was maybe a little more focused on plot, and Ordinary Love is more focused on big feelings. I think that if you're the sort of reader who, like, you loved Song of Achilles, or you loved like another queer book that just like swept you away in big feelings, I think that's the book for you. And I really have a lot of love in my heart for both kinds.
Yeah. Well, so my next question, well, it's funny you talk about, and I'm glad you got us there to the second chances because it's something I deeply resonated with as a reader of yours of Ordinary Love because my fiance, we actually met in undergrad, and that's 13 years ago. And we
Hmm.
didn't date. And well, we had a little flirtation, but we didn't date. And I was very interested, but I also wasn't like willing to settle down with someone during undergrad. I was
Hmm.
playing the field, Marie. I'll put it frankly for you. Uh, and then I went to Stony Brook and we kept in touch, but it wasn't like seeing each other a lot. And then when I actually was defending my dissertation in 2023, the summer of 2023, he like reached out and said he's coming to Long Island. We met up in Fire Island in Cherry Grove. And then
My favorite place.
I love it. I love Cherry Grove. So literary. I feel like there's such a literary creative spirit there. And we just rekindled and there was such a flame of romance and here we are now. So, the second chance romances are so beautiful and I feel like are a genre that um we're drawn to, right? Like we all don't know what could happen with someone who enters into your life. And I feel like I have to ask, was your book not just inspired, but like are you inspired by the second chance. I don't know what a second hand that's a different
I
type
mean,
of
like that could be
romance.
really, I think that that's a trope too, the secondhand romance, where like somebody's been kind of dumped by like I'm thinking of an Emily Henry book where someone's fiance just dumps her unceremoniously, and then she fake dates with somebody else, to kind of make him jealous, and then of course they fall in love. And so that is like a fake dating trope, but it's also kind of, I've never heard of a secondhand romance, but maybe that's one of them.
Yeah, I feel like a secondhand romance happens a lot in rom-coms. Like
Hmm.
you're reminding me of like trying to make someone jealous and
Yeah.
it just constantly gets out of control. But when I think of romance in films and I think of the difference between say a romantic drama and a romantic comedy, there's a lot of differences between The Notebook and say Legally Blonde.
Hmm.
Like just the way that the romance, the tone of the film. But right, like it would be very different if The Notebook took a romantic comedy approach at the
Oh,
end of
yeah.
their lives.
I mean, hard to imagine a rom-com about Alzheimer's, but
Yes.
sure. But yeah, I mean, I would say that Ordinary Love is more like The Notebook than it is like Legally Blonde. It's more a romantic drama. But like I love the story of you and your fiance, and I think too that it engages another trope that we haven't yet talked about, which is friends to lovers.
Mm.
Or
Yes.
I assume, you talked about like how there was a connection, but you didn't really pursue anything there. And um, I guess all this to say that we could sit around and diss tropes, right? Like that's something that writers can do. Like they can say, oh, this is a kind of pre-packaged plot, etc. But I think that on some level, we all know that tropes are important because they're real, because they're tapping into something that happens in real life or something that a lot of people are fascinated by, or that they like that narrative for some reason. And I don't think that we should turn away from pleasure. I don't think we should turn away from things that happen in real life, like the story about you and your fiance. and how that happens to a lot of people, that people reconnect over time. That is a thing that happens. So I don't think we should turn away from real life, and I don't think that we should turn away either from the pleasure of readers in a certain kind of story. I mean, I guess I would say that I engage some tropes, but I also, in ordinary love, like to subvert them a little bit or to react against them or write around them. It's not that I'm taking them in wholesale and just repeating them. Um, I also think, and this is kind of like an add-on to my answer, it's not something that you asked about, but I think it's really exciting to queer romance tropes that are more often associated with straight stories,
Yes.
right? I mean, there's something really powerful, I think, in taking these narratives that we see so often in straight rom-coms or straight romantic dramas, which I love, by the way. I find it so, like, even though I'm queer myself, there's something about a straight love story, like a straight film that's a love story that I just find so soothing. I don't know why. Maybe I need to dig in deeper to that. But like I will sit in front of Notting Hill like nobody's business or When Harry Met Sally. But I love it when I see a novel that takes some of the tropes we know so well in straight arenas and then lets it play out in a queer context.
Yeah. Well, and I feel like when we think of queer, or I think of queer romance in film or literature, like I think of Brokeback Mountain. Like if I had to pick something from the 21st century that's been held up by Hollywood as, well, we gave you a gay romantic narrative. Like we
Where
tried
people
it.
die
Yeah,
and
but
suffer.
like there's always like suffering and loneliness. Or I just saw the new film Queer by Luca Guadagnino. I mean, Call Me by Your Name. I feel like there's always the Hollywood films that they uphold. They have to have like a sense of loss, grief, longing, heartbreak. Like it's that constant trope of you're never going to be fully happy if you're in this queer relationship. Something has to tragically turn around. And I feel like it's beautiful that I'm not going to say you intentionally resist doing that, but like, is that something that weighs on you? Like that frustrated coming out of the closet narrative, like something tragic has to happen. Is that something you intentionally turn against, or you just feel like in our culture right now, those narratives aren't popularized?
Mm. Yes, I resist it. I will say I love Brokeback Mountain. I think
Mhm.
it's a beautiful short story. It's a beautiful film. Call Me by Your Name, even though that does involve loss too. It's also there's also a narrative in there too about acceptance and love. Like I'm thinking of the film version where the father talks with his son with Elio, and the father shows how much he knows his son and how much he loves his son,
Mhm.
um, who's been engaged in this, queer relationship all summer. Um, so it's what I want to say is that there is a place for stories like that. And they can be beautiful and important stories and validating as well, because not everybody's path has been so happy. I mean, I think
Mhm.
that a lot of queer people have experienced rejection, and from family, from society, there is suffering. Um, but that said, as you have said, that has been the primary diet that we've been fed in terms of literature and film for so long. And we need something else. Like, I think especially right now when like queer and trans people are so under attack by this administration, we need stories that are joyful and stories that are showing hope and I think Ordinary Love is writing against the tragic narrative, and it is writing towards a narrative of hope.
Yeah. And I feel like you can do the way that you give voice and breath to Emily, to Jen, to best friends who enter back into each other's orbit. You also, there's uplifting moments, there's optimistic moments, there's the second chance, but there's also, a psychological sense of unraveling going on, well, especially with Emily, and just everything going to shit at the beginning of the novel with her own personal relationship and how Jen enters back into her life. But I feel like, in my opinion, the most humanistic narrative is one that is both uplifting and sad at the same time, right? Like you have longing and you have comedy. Like, in my opinion, that's why a film like The Devil Wears Prada does so well because it's not slapstick. Like, yes, it's comedic, but it's also truthful. Like, there's authenticity that drives the plot. Or Pose. I think Pose, in my opinion, is one of the best queer TV shows ever in recent history, but there is a lot of sadness, but there's also joyfulness and rebellion and resistance and dancing. And I agree with you. I feel like right now I was actually going to ask you, and I thought, I wonder what Marie thinks of this current political hellscape. But you've answered the question of, you continue to write true to your own heart and showing the humanity of characters, like queer characters, any type of sexuality of the character. Like, is that something then you've been thinking a lot about in light of these past few months? Like, what do I write now? Like, where do I go now with representing my characters?
Welcome to Severed, a podcast suite dropping new episodes every Monday. Severed True Crime and Severed Paranormal episodes deep dive into murder, mysteries, and the otherworldly in a concise format. A 7-minute story to frame the case with thoughtful analysis and our usual banter.
We sometimes find the lighter side of darker cases. We offer 3 spin-off shows, Severed Strange Stories, Severed Haunted You, and Severed Serial Killers that highlight the unusual to lighthearted topics from the digital dumpsters of true crime, haunted universities, and the minds of madness like Ted Bundy and Jeffrey Dahmer.
We are your co-hosts. I'm Harry Chambers.
And I'm Drew Hudson. Listen on all major podcast platforms, including Rogue Media Network and Radio Garden State. Follow us on Instagram at severed_podcast.
Are you a fan of classic Hollywood movies?
Are you a fan of queer cinema?
Then do we have the podcast for you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian Garcia.
And I'm Luke Del Mar.
And we are your hosts of That Old Gay Classic Cinema, where we take a look at some of the greatest films of all time and analyze them through a queer theoretical lens.
Let's be honest. LGBTQIA plus people have been a part of Hollywood since its inception, and this podcast celebrates those artists and entertainers of yesteryear while also taking a closer look at the queer-coded characters and stories in classic Hollywood films long before queer representation entered the mainstream.
So follow us down the road of classic cinema as we give you a guide to some of the films that touched our hearts, brains, and even gave us courage to be ourselves.
You can listen to That Old Gay Classic Cinema wherever you get your podcasts, and be sure to follow us on Instagram, YouTube, and TikTok.
All right, listeners, we're ready for our close-up.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know yet what shape my next book will take. And I wrote Ordinary Love before the election. But I think that we've seen the storm on the horizon for some time. I think that well before the election, we could see um, what the conservative right was trying to accomplish for years. So I'm not sure that I would say that I was thinking very consciously about that storm on the horizon. I might say even that on some level I was trying to avoid it because this book is set in the near past. You get parts in the 90s and then in the kind of like the 2000s, but the main bulk of the narrative is taking place between 2011 and 2012, which is when the Olympics happen. Um, so it's done, during the Obama years and
Mm.
before, we've had this political and cultural shift. So I might have even been trying to escape it on some level. So I'm like treating you like my therapist, or like
No,
I'm
it's
in a
fine.
therapy session. But I will say that so much of the book is about finding love and acceptance, even when you don't get it from really important places.
Mm.
Like Emily's father is homophobic. And there's a pretty difficult scene when she's 18, her father's taken her and Jen out um, for Emily's birthday. And Emily and Jen are already together romantically, but the father doesn't know that.
Mm.
Emily's just presented Jen as her best friend. And so Emily's with her father and his new family, like his new wife, their two little girls, and Jen has brought her grandmother, and they're all sitting around the table, and the father clocks Jen. Basically like looks at Jen. Jen is visibly gay in a way that Emily is not, like even at 18. And he just knows. And he essentially outs Jen in front of her grandmother. And Emily, I mean, she's 18. She's really young. She doesn't know what to do. She doesn't want her father to stop loving her.
Mm.
And so she just remains silent and allows it to happen, which is a cruel thing to do to somebody that you love. Um, and she can see how afraid Jen is of her grandmother's reaction. And what the grandmother says is, I love you. I love everything about you. I am so proud. And Emily feels this great jealousy. Like she's aware both of her own sense of fault and that she's allowed this scene to play out. She's allowed her father to be unkind to somebody that she loves. At the same time, she wishes she had that she wishes she had that kind of great love and acceptance that Jen has from her grandmother. And we know that Emily doesn't have that for a lot of the book, but is able to find it. And so all of this is to say that something that happens, I think, again and again in the book, is that when a character encounters a great lack, like a great emotional lack, a lack of love, a lack of support, a lack of knowing, like when a parent should really know their child, she is able to find it in another way, like through a friend, through love, romantic love, through her own connection with her kids.
Mm.
That was a
No,
I've
it's
kind of
so
wandered so far
beautiful.
away from the question that
No,
I
it's so
didn't know where
beautiful.
we
And I
were.
feel like, again, it brings us back to the guiding heartbeat of your novel, which operates in, again, fictiveness, but the reality of experience. Like, this is something, every scene really does feel. I don't like to just say that it feels real, but it has just so much authentic spirit. And not saying every novel needs that, right? Like we love fantasies and it's fine to be in this speculative sci-fi realm, but it is lovely to read a novel that actually at the heart of it speaks to everyone's ordinariness and questioning that concept. Like that's something I wanted to ask you about your title is ordinary love. Like what does it mean in your opinion, Marie, for us to like for people to strive for ordinariness? Like I feel like that's something that the queer community has a lot of debates about. Like whether it was we just celebrated same-sex marriage being legalized after 10 years. And there were some in the queer community who were actually resistant towards that because they said like that's not going to fully emancipate the queer community from homophobia, for example. Like is that necessarily going to help with visibility around specifically the trans community and those who don't want to enter into a marriage? So that fight for, well, does the queer community really want to be ordinary or do they want to be always seen in an act of resistance or against straight normative culture, so to speak? How not only do you weigh in on that, but like how do you think about that concept of ordinariness?
Um, I think it's not either or. I don't think
Mhm.
it's either we resist the kind of quote unquote normal ways of living life or like marriage and kids and so forth. I don't think it's either that we resist that or we collaborate with it. I think one of the things that's so special about the queer community is that it is many communities and that it is not monolithic. And there's a great deal, I hope, awareness of that, that there are, oops, sorry. I don't know what that alarm is for.
It's
Um,
fine.
but I guess I would say a couple of things. And one is me realizing that I never fully answered your previous questions. So I'm going to try to do that. And just to say that I think art and joy can be an act of resistance. Like
Mm,
love can be an act of resistance. Insisting on yourself and on who you are in the face of great odds, like whether that's, being strong and open in who you love or what your gender is, etc. Like that is always that existence and that presence of self is always going to be an act of resistance against systems that would try to destroy that or squash it. Um, and in terms of the question about ordinariness, um, in my book, as I don't mean ordinary as
mundane or boring.
no, no, no. Well, I guess I don't mean it as the script,
Mm,
right? Like I think that like we all inherit certain scripts about like what we're supposed to do. Like get married, like if you're a girl, go find a guy and get married and have kids, which is something I did. Like I did, I was married to a man and with whom I'm still on good terms. And we had two kids together, whom I love, obviously, but there are certain scripts to follow. And with the term ordinary in the book, I'm not suggesting that Emily or Jen are trying to live an expected life or conform to what people expect of them.
mm.
I think what I'm trying to say is that the act of love is never ordinary and it can be mundane, like I'm sure that there are moments when like your fiance does the dishes
Yes.
and you're just like, ah, what an act of love. You know,
Yeah.
like maybe you don't always feel that way, but I think there are probably moments when you do. And I think that, you know, it's not always epic.
Yeah.
Like that love, sometimes love is epic. Sometimes there is big love and huge feelings. And I love that. But also, you can experience love, and I don't just mean romantic love. I can mean like the love between friends or love for your kids or for a parent
Mm.
in just really ordinary acts of kindness or care or connection.
I mean, yes, to everything. I think that it's also something that in those moments, like whether it be chores or going grocery shopping, like there's also some, not trying to say it's as exciting as going to a Broadway musical or like going to a huge festival, but there is, when you look back, I do find that I look back at memories of even going to the library with my mom as a child as
Mhm.
special as going to a huge gala event. Like
Yeah.
actually sometimes the quote unquote ordinary moments are as even more emotionally memorable in my mind, like remembering the way that it stuck with me to shape me who I am. And I think that your book really does evoke that question of like thinking about, I mean, if you can, Marie, I was reading about this powerful French quote that, your ex's father said
My
about
ex,
how like something changes in like an ordinary everyday moment. Like something could happen that you don't expect. I think it's everything will change is the phrase.
Mhm.
Um, and if you remember, I think it's tu vas, and I'm not very proficient in French, but um, what was that like hearing that from your father-in-law at the time about how things change in, I think in his experience, it was about World War II.
Yeah. So it's um maybe a couple years ago. I mean, I love my former in-laws, and I still sort of think of them as my in-laws. They're so wonderful, such good people. And I had them over for dinner and with my kids, and we were sitting around, and I just said, could everybody say what their first memory is?
Wow.
And I think you're right that for a lot of people, so much emotion is infused in just something ordinary. Like my um, Christiane, who was my mother-in-law, she said that she just remembered eating a tomato for the first time and how amazing it was. And Jean-Claude, um, her husband, told this story about how when he was little, he was a small child during World War II, and his whole family had been moved to the countryside to avoid the bombing at Lorient, where there was a big port and I think like a submarine station. And they lived in Lorient, so they had to get out of the city. And so the entire extended family lived on a farm. And he can remember his first memory, or the first memory that he knows is really his, um, was when the war ended and the adults told the kids, we're going back. We're going back home. You're going to go to school. And that Jean-Claude went out to this field where there was this big rock where all the kids played, and he was alone. And he wanted to see the rock because he knew that something was over and something new would begin. And that he thought tout va changer, which means everything will change. I mean, it's crazy that he had such like a beautiful story to tell from when he was maybe 4 years old. I mean, I think that speaks a lot to the sort of person that he is. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think that, even in that memory, even as kind of emotional and even in some ways philosophical it was, there's still the rock, there's still the field, right? There are still these ordinary things that root us to the memories that we have.
Yeah, and even in the midst of such crisis like World War II, the water is still moving in the ocean.
Hmm.
Like those, like right now, even in such chaotic times, what keeps us grounded? I think that that's such a beautiful, going on a walk and going to your favorite restaurant or going to a cafe to grab your favorite iced latte, for example.
Yeah.
You still can hold on to certain uh pleasurable activities in crisis.
Hmm.
Hopefully we don't lose that community space. So, Marie, this has been so wonderful. I've had such a good time talking with you, picking your intellectual mind. Your students are very lucky. I want to be a fly on the wall in your classroom to see what the conversations are like. So, where can everyone find Ordinary Love? Also, where can they follow you on social media? All the good things.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you so much. It was such a pleasure for me to talk with you and about such wide-ranging and fascinating topics. Ordinary Love can really be, I think, found almost everywhere online and in bookstores, though I would love it if people supported their local independent bookstores and picked up a copy there. Um, my local bookstore is Greenlight Books in
Mm,
Brooklyn. That's the closest bookstore to me and one that I love, among many bookstores that I love. And actually, they have signed copies, so you could go there. And
cool.
The Strand also another. Oh my God, that alarm! I am gonna have to go. Um, but you can get it, and like they're signed copies at the Strand, another bookstore that I love, and yeah, and you can find me online, Marie Rutkoski. That's my handle on social media, both. I don't use Twitter, now X. I'm no longer on that platform, but you can certainly find me on Instagram.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Marie. And, I can't wait for you to be back in the ITBR, hopefully with your next novel or work that you're thinking of.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Okay. Bye, Marie.
Bye.